The morning my vision returned, the world came back in pieces. Light first, then shapes, then the specific, ordinary details of the bedroom Bruce and I shared. The curtain moving slightly where the window was cracked. The water glass on his nightstand. The slow, unremarkable ceiling of a life I had built in the dark. I lay there for a full minute just breathing, afraid to trust it, afraid that if I moved or blinked too hard it would dissolve back into gray and I would be back in the version of myself that needed to count steps from the bed to the bathroom and apologize every time I misjudged a doorframe. But it held. The light held, and the shapes sharpened, and I could see. I pressed my hands over my mouth and felt tears come from somewhere deep. And for a few minutes I let myself feel only the joy of it, uncomplicated and huge, before I got up and went to find Bruce to tell him that the thing he'd blamed himself for every day for the past year had finally reversed itself. I wanted to give him that. I wanted to see his face when I told him. I stepped into the living room and stopped. I want to be accurate about the sequence of what I saw and heard, because the details matter. Bruce was not simply standing close to Carrie. They were in a full embrace, the kind that doesn't happen between people who are just cousins-in-law, the kind that has weight and history and routine behind it. And Carrie was talking, her voice light and pleased in a way that turned my stomach, saying the baby was healthy. The doctor had cleared her. And wasn't it exciting? Her exact word. Exciting. To do this here while I was asleep in the other room. Bruce told her to shut up. He told her not to joke about his wife like that. And then he kissed her. He said don't talk about her like that and kissed the woman he was saying it to, and I stood in the hallway in my recovered vision watching the two of them and understood that I had been living inside a lie so large and so carefully constructed that I hadn't even known to look for the edges of it. 6 months. I rolled that number around in my head as I backed silently into my room and closed the door without a sound. 6 months ago they had both, separately and then together, developed a sudden passion for indoor workouts. They needed the living room clear for their routines. They needed privacy to focus. I had thought it was sweet. Honestly, Carrie taking care of herself during the pregnancy I didn't know was Bruce's. Bruce being supportive and health conscious. I had been in the dark literally, and they had been in the dark with me, moving freely through a house I thought was mine, in a life I thought was mine, with a future I had already begun to picture down to the specific details. I sat on the edge of the bed and I did not cry. I made a decision instead. Bruce didn't need to know my sight had returned. Not yet. Not until I understood the full shape of what I was standing inside. I picked up my phone and I called my mother. My voice when I spoke surprised me. Steady, clear, already decided. I told her I wasn't marrying Bruce. I told her I would marry into the Blake family instead. She asked no questions in that moment, just said she would support me no matter what, and that Bruce wasn't treating me right. And I said okay, and we hung up. That was it. That fast. 12 seconds to dismantle 2 years of an engagement, and I felt nothing but the cold, focusing clarity of a woman who has just identified the actual shape of her problem. They left together 20 minutes later, side by side, hand in hand, believing I was asleep. I followed them. I kept half a block between us and tracked them to Bruce's parents' home nearby. Moving through a neighborhood I knew well enough to navigate even when I couldn't see it. And I stood back as the front door opened and Bruce's siblings spilled out with gifts and bright faces and congratulations. Happy pregnancy, Carrie. You're going to be a father, Bruce. I watched his mother take Carrie by the arm and lead her inside with the warmth and pride she had never once directed at me, and I stood on the pavement outside their home and heard every word through the open door. His mother said she'd been worried about her grandchildren inheriting a blind woman's genes. She said the Wills family would finally have healthy grandchildren. One of the siblings said that without Bruce's charity, nobody in Kent City would want to marry me, that I acted above my station, that Carrie was so much better. Bruce's face went cold and he told them not to say that, said I had lost my sight because of him, said they should never talk about me that way. And then he let his mother pour Carrie a drink to celebrate the baby, and he sat down at the table and he stayed. I walked home with tears I refused to release running down my face and cold air coming into my lungs too fast. And I sat in my room in the dark out of habit even though I no longer needed to, and I thought about what I had just watched. Bruce's defense of me was real, I believed that. In his way, in whatever broken and dishonest way he felt something for me. But he had also let his mother call my genes defective. He had also gotten my cousin pregnant. He had also been doing this for 6 months in our shared home while I stumbled through its rooms counting steps. Whatever he felt for me existed alongside all of that without, apparently, canceling any of it out. And that was the thing I couldn't forgive. Not the betrayal alone, but the coexistence. That he could kiss my forehead and also this. That he could hold my hand in the doctor's office and also this. That he could feel both things and let both things continue and never find that contradiction unbearable enough to stop. My mother called back 2 hours later. The Blakes had agreed. The engagement ceremony would be in 3 days. I said okay and put my phone down and felt, underneath the grief, a thin clean wire of something that wasn't quite satisfaction but was adjacent to it, a direction, a next step. Something to build. That night at midnight, Bruce came in with the milk. He did this every night. Set it on the nightstand, coaxed me to drink it, told me that watching me be a good girl about the milk gave him a sense of a happy home, a domestic peace. I had found it a little strange, but chalked it up to Bruce's specific ways of expressing care. He had a lot of them. I reached out my hand to take the glass and he caught my wrist gently, noticing the small cut I'd gotten outside, asking why I was injured, telling me it was his fault for not protecting me well enough, that after the wedding he'd always be by my side. His voice was warm and sincere, his hand on my shoulder steady and grounding, and I understood in that moment that I was watching a truly skilled performance. Not malicious in its entirety maybe, but a performance. I drank the milk. I told myself I would deal with it. I waited until he left the room, and I spat every drop into the bathroom sink. A few minutes later I heard Carrie's voice outside the door, asking if I was asleep yet. And everything I had attributed to love and routine and domesticity rearranged itself in one cold second into something completely different. The milk. Every night for God knows how long. The careful routine of it, the warmth and intimacy he attached to it, the good girl and drink up, all of it was engineering. All of it was just the mechanism by which he made sure I was unconscious enough not to hear what happened next. I stood in the bathroom with my hand over my mouth and understood that I had not been loved the way I thought I had been loved, that what I'd experienced as tenderness had a function, and that function was my own removal from the situation. I was the obstacle. The milk was how they moved me out of the way. I sat on the cold bathroom floor for a long time. Then I got up. I washed my face. And I made a list. Over the next 72 hours, while appearing to see nothing, I saw everything. I watched how they moved around each other in our home. I noted what Bruce touched, what he kept, where he stored the documents that related to the property my family's money had helped him purchase. I called my family's lawyer from the bathroom with the shower running. I called the Blake family's representative and confirmed the engagement details. I contacted the wedding venue we'd booked under my family's name, which was most of it, as it turned out, because my family was the wealthy one, and Bruce's family had contributed the kind of enthusiasm that doesn't actually come with a check. I began quietly, methodically, withdrawing every thread of my family's resources that had been woven into Bruce's life over the past 2 years. It was remarkable how many there were once I started pulling. The apartment, the car under my father's company insurance, the investment my uncle had made in Bruce's business venture after we got engaged as a show of good faith. Thread by thread, with my sight fully returned and my voice completely steady, I unwound everything. The engagement ceremony for the Blake family's son was held on a bright, cold afternoon 3 days later, and I attended in a dress that was very deliberately not white, but was very deliberately beautiful. My hair done with the help of a stylist my mother had sent, my eyes, my working, seeing, fully functional eyes, steady and clear. Bruce did not know I had been invited. The Blake family had been told everything by my mother, who had a gift for selective disclosure, and they had agreed to the arrangement with the kind of enthusiasm that made me understand that matching with my family was genuinely desirable on their end. Blake's son's vegetative state notwithstanding. I understood the transaction I was entering. I entered it clear-eyed, which felt appropriate under the circumstances. Bruce found out about the engagement from someone who'd attended the ceremony and posted about it online. He called me 17 times in 2 hours. When I finally answered, on the 18th call, I said hello in my normal voice and waited. He demanded to know what I was doing, what the Blakes were, whether I'd lost my mind, why I was throwing away everything we'd built. His voice cracked in a way that might have broken me once. I let him finish. Then I said, "Bruce, I got my sight back 3 days ago." The silence on the other end of the line was the loudest thing I had ever heard. "The first thing I saw," I said, keeping my voice completely level, "was you and Carrie. The second thing I saw was your family celebrating her pregnancy and discussing my genetics. The third thing I figured out was the milk." He said my name once, just Nancy, in a voice I didn't have a category for. I said, "I think we're done here." I hung up. Carrie called an hour later. I didn't answer. She texted, a long, messy, defensive message about how complicated it was, how feelings developed, how she hoped I could understand. I read it once and set my phone face down. Bruce's mother called the next day, her voice stripped of the comfortable contempt I'd heard through that open doorway, now carrying a new and unfamiliar register. Something between damage control and panic, because she had realized, presumably, that the blind woman whose genes she'd called defective could now see perfectly well, and had already begun legally untangling her family's money from her son's life. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was almost impressive in how quickly it pivoted from pride to diplomacy. I didn't return it. The Blake engagement wasn't love, and I didn't pretend it was. It was a decision made by a woman with perfect vision who had just watched everyone around her make their decisions very clearly, and who had decided to make her own with equal clarity. There would be time for everything else later. For healing, for anger, For the specific grief of looking back at 2 years of a relationship and finding the performance hiding inside the tenderness. There would be time for all of it. Right now there was a family that had welcomed me and a future that had nothing in it that needed to be managed or medicated into unconsciousness. The last thing I heard about Bruce came through my mother 3 weeks later. Carrie had moved into the apartment, my former apartment, the one currently in legal dispute, and Bruce was telling people I'd had a breakdown and made impulsive decisions, that I wasn't well, that he hoped I'd get the help I needed. His family was backing this version of events with the same unified enthusiasm they'd brought to the pregnancy celebration. I read my mother's message about it and felt nothing that surprised me. Of course that was the story. Of course the blind woman who finally saw everything and walked away became, in their retelling, the unstable one. The woman who couldn't handle reality. It was almost elegant, how consistent they were. I put my phone down and looked out the window of my new room, a real window with real light coming through it, and I thought about the milk. About all those nights I'd drunk it obediently, wanting to give him the happiness of a peaceful home, not even knowing what I was giving him. I thought about how long a person can be in the dark and still convince themselves the dark is just the way things are. Then I got up. I had a meeting with my lawyer in an hour, and after that, dinner with the Blake family, and after that, approximately the rest of my life, which was going to look nothing like the one I'd been carefully managed out of seeing clearly. I checked my reflection in the mirror on the way out. My eyes were sharp and bright and fully, irreversibly open. I left without looking back.